Hello and welcome back to the Candlelit Journal. Tonight, we return to the Crossroads Inn where the late summer air hangs heavy with the scent of ripening grain and the last wildflowers of the season. The days are still long, but there's a softness to the light now, a golden quality that speaks of harvest coming and seasons turning. In this episode, we'll meet travelers who carry more than supplies in their packs. A puppeteer returning home after years away. A young herbalist with a letter she's never dared to open. A road warden making his final journey. Siblings bound by a dream they cannot explain. And a beekeeper carrying the last sweetness of a life he's leaving behind. So settle in. Let the weight of your day slip away. The fire is warm, the hour is late, and our innkeeper has much to share. Let us begin.
The summer has reached that particular moment when it seems to hold its breath. The days remain warm, sometimes uncomfortably so, but there is a quality to the light that tells me autumn waits just beyond the horizon. The shadows stretch longer each evening. The crickets sing with a kind of urgency, as if they know their time grows short. In the kitchen garden, the tomatoes have ripened all at once, and I have spent the better part of 3 days preserving what I can. Jars of crushed tomatoes sealed with wax, dried slices hanging in the pantry like small red coins. This morning, I woke before dawn, as I often do in summer when the heat makes sleep fitful. I lay in my narrow bed beneath the sloping ceiling and listen to the world wake. First, the birds. Tentative calls from the oak tree, answered by others in the woods beyond the road. Then the horses shifting in the stable, their soft sounds carrying through my small eastern window. Finally, the creak of the inn itself, timbers expanding as the first warmth of day reached them. I rose and dressed, and went down to start the fire for the morning's bread. The common room held that particular stillness of early hours, the chairs pushed back from last night's modest gathering, the long tables wiped clean, but still bearing the faint rings of mugs long since emptied. I knelt before the great fireplace and coaxed the banked coals back to life, adding kindling and then larger pieces until the flames caught properly. The bread dough had risen overnight, covered with a damp cloth near the hearth's warmth. I punched it down and shaped the loaves, sliding them into the clay oven my father built so many years ago. The rhythm of it, the familiar motions, the yeasty smell, the gradual warming of the kitchen settled something in me. There is comfort in repetition, in the small rituals that mark our days. By the time the bread was baking, the sun had cleared the eastern mountains. Light poured through the kitchen window in a golden flood, catching the dust motes that drifted lazily in the still air. I made myself a cup of mint tea and carried it outside to drink on the bench beside the door. The crossroads lay quiet in the morning light. The north-south road stretched away in both directions, disappearing into the haze of distance. The east-west road did the same, though I could see perhaps a mile toward the coast before the land dipped and the road vanished from view. The ancient oak stood at the intersection as it always has, its massive trunk casting a shadow that shifted slowly as the sun climbed. Someone had tied a new ribbon to one of its lower branches, pale blue, fluttering gently in the barely there breeze. I did not remember seeing anyone approach the tree yesterday, but travelers sometimes come and go in the night, leaving their prayers without seeking shelter. I finished my tea and went back inside to tend to my morning tasks. There were vegetables to prepare for the day's stew, floors to sweep, linens to air. The work of an inn is never truly finished, only paused between one necessity and the next. But I have grown to love these quiet hours when the common room belongs to me alone and I can move through it at my own pace, touching the tables my father made, straightening the chairs, ensuring that everything is ready for whoever might arrive. The first traveler of the day appeared around mid-morning when the heat had begun to build in earnest. I heard the cart before I saw it, the slow creak of wheels, the patient plod of a horse that had been walking for hours. They stepped outside to watch as it approached from the south, a modest wagon with a canvas cover bleached nearly white by seasons of sun and weather. The driver was a man perhaps 10 years my junior, with dark hair tied back from a weathered face and hands that bore the calluses of someone who worked with them constantly. He pulled the horse to a stop near the stable and sat for a moment, looking at the inn with an expression I could not quite read. There was something in his eyes, recognition perhaps, or its opposite, the look of someone seeing a place for the first time that nonetheless feels familiar. "Welcome," I called out, crossing the yard toward him. "You look like you could use water for your horse and perhaps something cool to drink yourself." He climbed down from the wagon seat slowly, his movements careful in a way that suggested stiffness from long travel. "Water would be welcome," he said. His voice was pleasant, if tired, "and shade if you have it. The sun seems determined to remind us it's still summer." I led his horse to the trough beside the stable and let it drink while I studied the wagon. The canvas cover was patched in several places, and the wooden sides bore the kind of wear that comes from years of use. But there was something else. Painted along the side panel, faded but still visible, was a design I had not expected. Figures in motion, dancers perhaps, or performers, and above them, in letters that had once been bright colors, a name: Castellan's Traveling Puppets. "You're a puppeteer," I said, and it was not quite a question. The man turned from watching his horse drink and looked at me with something like surprise. "I was," he said. "Am. It's complicated." He paused, then seemed to decide something. "I've been away for 7 years, traveling the eastern coast, the harbor towns, places where people have coined bed for entertainment. I'm heading home now, or trying to." "Where is home?" He gestured vaguely northward. "A village in the foothills, 2 days' travel, maybe 3 if the roads are as bad as I remember. I left when I was young and foolish, and I'm returning now that I'm older and perhaps equally foolish." There was a weight to his words that I recognized, the particular heaviness of someone carrying more than they wished to speak of. I did not press. Instead, I led him inside and poured him cider from the cold jug I keep in the root cellar, and I cut him bread from the morning's baking and brought cheese and a small dish of honey. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, as if he had not tasted good bread in some time. Perhaps he had not. The eastern coastal towns are known for their fish and their rice, not their wheat. When he finished, he sat back and let out a long breath, and some of the tension in his shoulders seemed to ease. "I had forgotten," he said quietly, "what bread like this tastes like. My mother used to bake every 3rd day. The smell would fill our whole house." "Is she waiting for you, your mother?" He was silent for a moment. "I don't know," he said finally. "I haven't written in 3 years. Haven't received a letter in 4. I left badly, you see. Said things I shouldn't have said, didn't say things I should have. By the time I realized my mistakes, it seemed too late to fix them, so I kept traveling, kept moving, kept telling myself that someday I would go back and make things right. He turned the empty cup in his hands. Someday became 7 years. I refilled his cider and said nothing, giving him space to continue or not as he chose. After a moment, he did. I brought something to show them, to prove that the years weren't wasted, that I learned something out there in the world. He stood and went to the door, then outside to his wagon. When he returned, he carried a wooden case, worn but well cared for, and set it on the table between us. Inside, nested in cloth padding, were puppets, but not the simple string and cloth figures I had seen at village fairs as a child. These were works of art, carved from pale wood with such skill that they seemed almost alive. A king with a tiny crown and robes of real silk. A maiden with hair made from actual human hair, dark and lustrous. A fool with bells on his cap that actually rang when he moved. And others, a soldier, a witch, a child, an old man bent with age. I carved them myself, the puppeteer said. Everyone. Over the years, when I had time between performances, the coastal towns loved them. They said I had magic in my hands. He lifted the maiden, carefully manipulating the strings so that she seemed to turn and look at him. But they're not for audiences anymore. They're for my mother, for my father, for my sister, if she'll speak to me, to show them what I became while I was gone. I looked at the puppets, at the incredible detail in their tiny faces, and I understood something of what he was trying to say. These were not just toys or tools of his trade. They were years of his life, made tangible. Proof that his absence had meaning, that he had not simply abandoned his family for nothing. They're beautiful, I said, and I meant it. He began to put them away, handling each one with the tenderness of a parent with a sleeping child. But as he lifted the old man figure, the one bent with age carved from wood so dark it was nearly black, I felt something strange, a flicker at the edge of my vision. I turned toward the mantel, toward the white candle that has burned there since my first winter in this inn, and I saw its flame lean toward the puppeteer. Not much, just a slight inclination, as if drawn by a draft that I could not feel. The puppeteer did not seem to notice. He placed the old man puppet in its spot and closed the case. And by the time I looked back at the candle, its flame burned straight and true as always. I have learned not to speak of such things unless asked. The crossroads holds its own mysteries, and the candle has shown me over the years that it sees more than I understand. If it recognized something in the puppeteer or his creations, that knowledge was not mine to share. But I found myself looking at the old man puppet again, trying to understand what had caught the candle's attention. The wood was darker than the others, nearly black, with a grain so fine it almost seemed to shimmer in the afternoon light. The carving was exquisite. The lines of age in the face, the way the shoulders hunched beneath an invisible burden, the hands raised as if in blessing or supplication. And there was something about the eyes, tiny points of darker wood set into the face, that seemed almost to follow me as I moved. "Where did you find the wood for this one?" I asked. Theo looked up, surprised by the question. "I didn't find it. It was given to me. An old man in one of the harbor towns years ago, he saw me carving in the square and brought me a piece of wood wrapped in cloth. Said it had been waiting for the right hands. Said it wanted to become something. He touched the puppet's face gently. I know how that sounds, but when I unwrapped it, I knew exactly what it wanted to be. The shape was already there, inside the wood. I just had to reveal it. And the old man? What happened to him? I don't know. When I looked up to thank him, he was gone. I searched the square, asked the vendors if they'd seen him. No one had. It was as if he had appeared just long enough to give me the wood and then vanished. Theo shook his head. I told myself I must have imagined it, that I'd been working too long in the sun, but the wood was real, and the puppet. He lifted the old man figure again, and again I saw the candle flame lean toward it. The puppet has always felt different from the others. Heavier, somehow, not in weight, but in presence. I did not tell him what I had observed. Some mysteries are not mine to unravel. But I filed the information away, another piece of the pattern that seemed always to be forming and reforming around this crossroads. You're welcome to stay, I told him. Rest tonight. Start fresh tomorrow. The road north can be hard in this heat, and you've clearly been traveling for some time. He considered this, then nodded. One night, he cried, I've been putting this off for 7 years. One more night won't matter, and perhaps. He paused, looking at the case of puppets. Perhaps I'm not quite ready yet. Perhaps I need a little more time to find the words I'll need when I get there. I showed him to one of the private rooms upstairs, the one with the window facing north, toward the mountains he would soon be crossing. He thanked me quietly and closed the door, and I heard no sound from within for the rest of the afternoon. The second traveler arrived in the late afternoon when the shadows had begun to lengthen and the worst of the day's heat had passed. She came on foot from the east, a young woman with a pack on her back and a wide-brimmed hat shading her face from the sun. Her clothes were practical: sturdy boots, a skirt hemmed short enough for walking, a linen shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbows. Her hands, I noticed as she approached, were stained with something greenish-brown. "Good afternoon," she called out as she neared the inn. "Is this the Crossroads Inn? I was told I could find shelter here." "You were told correctly," I replied. Come in. You look like you've been walking since morning." "Since before morning," she said with a tired smile. "There's a meadow about 6 hours east where a particular flower blooms only in late summer. I had to be there at dawn to collect it properly. Something about the dew and the way the light hits the petals. My grandmother taught me that years ago." She came inside and set down her pack with evident relief. It clinked and rustled with the sounds of glass jars and dried plants, and when she opened it to retrieve her water skin, I caught the smell of herbs, mint, and something sharper, perhaps yarrow. "You're an herbalist," I said. "Apprentice herbalist," she corrected, though something in her tone suggested the distinction was more modesty than accuracy. Or I was. My grandmother trained me from the time I could walk. She knew every plant in these hills, every root and leaf and flower, what they could heal, what they could harm, when to harvest them, and how to prepare them. She paused, her hand stilling on her pack. She passed 2 winters ago. I've been trying to continue her work, but it's not the same without her guidance." "The work continues, though," I said gently. "You're still gathering, still learning." Yes. She pulled a bundle of pale purple flowers from her pack, their petals still damp with morning dew. These are moonveil blooms. They only grow in one meadow, and they're only potent if you harvest them at dawn, before the sun touches them directly. My grandmother showed me that meadow when I was 12 years old. We walked there in the dark, carrying lanterns, and when we arrived, the whole field was glowing. The flowers give off a faint light at night, you see. Something in the petals. I'd never seen anything so beautiful. She fell quiet, lost in the memory. I gave her space, moving quietly around the common room, lighting candles as the afternoon dimmed. She made a tea from these flowers. Marin continued eventually. For grief, for loss, she said it didn't take the pain away, but it made it bearable, made it possible to continue. I've been making that tea for myself these past 2 years when the missing gets too heavy. She carefully wrapped the flowers again and tucked them back into her pack. This morning's harvest was the best I've ever gotten. The blooms were perfect, as if they'd been waiting for me. I brought her bread and cheese and a cup of cold water from the spring, and she ate with the focused attention of someone who had been too busy to think about food until now. As she ate, I noticed something else in her pack. Not jars or plants, but a bundle of letters tied with a twine. The paper was yellowed, the edges soft with handling, and atop the bundle sat a single envelope that looked newer than the rest. She saw me looking, and her hand moved instinctively to cover it. Then she seemed to catch herself and let out a small, rueful laugh. "My grandmother's letters," she said. "She wrote to me often when I was away studying with another healer in the lowlands. I've read them all 100 times, all except one." She touched the newer envelope. This one came after she died. It was with her things, addressed to me, sealed. The neighbor who sent her belongings said she must have written it just before the end, when she knew her time was short. "But you haven't opened it?" "No." She was quiet for a moment, her fingers resting on the envelope. "I've carried it for 2 years, taken it out 1,000 times, but I can never quite bring myself to break the seal. It's the last thing she'll ever say to me. Once I read it, there won't be any more. No more of her words waiting to be discovered. It will truly be over." I understood this more than I could say. When my father died, I found a half-written letter on his desk, addressed to no one, perhaps meant for himself. I read it once and have not read it again, though I know exactly where it is. Some words are too heavy to carry often. "Perhaps," I said gently, "she wrote it so you would read it. Perhaps what's inside is something she needed you to know." The young herbalist, she told me her name was Marin, looked at the envelope for a long moment. "Perhaps," she said. Or perhaps she knew me well enough to know I would need time. She was always patient like that, never pushed, just waited until I was ready. She tucked the envelope back into her pack with care. "I thought maybe on this journey, the meadow where I collected today's flowers was one of her favorite places. She took me there when I was a child. I thought maybe there, surrounded by her memory, I might find the courage. But when the moment came, I still couldn't do it." She finished her meal and asked if she might used the garden behind the inn to sort and dry the plants she had collected. I told her she was welcome to it, and I watched through the kitchen window as she spread her harvest on clean cloths. In the late afternoon sun, delicate purple flowers, bundles of green leaves, roots still trailing to soil. She worked with the quiet competence of someone who had done this many times, her hands moving almost automatically while her mind, I suspected, was far away. The puppeteer came down as evening approached, looking rested if still somewhat burdened. He saw Marin in the garden and watched her for a moment through the window, then turned to me with a question in his eyes. "Another traveler," I said, "an herbalist collecting plants for medicines and remedies." He nodded slowly. "I remember herbalists in my village. There was an old woman who knew all the plants of the hills. She saved my sister's life once. When the fever took hold and wouldn't let go, 3 days she sat by the bedside brewing teas and applying poultices until the fever finally broke." He paused. "I wonder if she's still alive. I wonder if anyone I remember is still as I remember them." There was nothing I could say to ease that particular fear, so I simply poured him more cider and began preparing the evening meal. Tonight would be a simple supper. The vegetable stew I had started that morning with fresh bread and the last of the spring cheese. Enough to fill bellies and warm spirits without requiring more effort than the day's heat would allow. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Marin came in from the garden with her plants carefully bundled and stored. She and the puppeteer exchanged polite nods, the cautious acknowledgement of strangers who will be sharing space for the night. I served them at separate tables, respecting their evident desire for solitude, but as the meal progressed and the common room filled with the soft sounds of eating and the gentle crackle of the fire I had built more for light than warmth, I noticed them glancing at each other with increasing curiosity. It was Marin who finally spoke across the space between them. "That's a beautiful rickon you have outside. Are you a merchant of some kind?" The puppeteer set down his spoon. "A puppeteer, or Iowa. I'm traveling home after many years away." "Home?" Marin repeated, and there was something wistful in her voice. "I've been thinking about home a great deal lately, about what makes a place feel like home, and whether you can ever truly go back to one." "And what have you concluded?" She considered this. "I think home is less a place than a feeling, a sense of belonging, of being known and accepted. My grandmother's cottage was home not because of its walls or its garden, but because she was there. Now that she's gone." She trailed off, then shook her head. "I'm sorry, that's more than you asked for." "No," the puppeteer said quietly. "No, I think I understand exactly what you mean." They fell silent after that, but the silence felt different, less the distance of strangers and more the shared quiet of people who recognize something of themselves in each other. I cleared their dishes and refilled their cups, and as the evening deepened and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I excused myself to write these words by the light of the candle that never dims. The flame burned steadily tonight, casting its familiar glow across my small desk. But twice now it has flickered toward the door as if anticipating arrivals yet to come. The crossroads is quiet, the road's empty as far as I can see. But I have learned to trust the candle's instincts. Tomorrow, I suspect, will bring more travelers. It always does. Day 2. The heat broke overnight. I woke to the sound of rain on the roof, not the gentle patter of a passing shower, but the steady drumming of a proper storm. Lightning flickered beyond my eastern window, followed by the low rumble of thunder rolling across the hills. The air that came through the cracks around the window frame was cool and damp and wonderful after so many days of relentless warmth. I lay in bed for a time, listening to the storm and feeling grateful for solid walls and a sound roof. My father built well. In all my years in this inn, I have never found a leak, never felt a draft strong enough to trouble the candles. He knew what he was doing, my father. He built to last. When I finally rose and went downstairs, I found the common room already occupied. Marin sat near the window with a cup of tea, watching the rain streak down the glass. She had the bundle of letters in her lap, her fingers resting on the sealed envelope, though she did not open it. The puppeteer was nowhere to be seen, still abed perhaps, or perhaps simply taking advantage of the rain to delay his journey one more day. "Good morning," I said. "The weather seems to have made your decision for you. No one should be traveling in this." Marin smiled, though it did not quite reach her eyes. "I don't mind the delay. There's nowhere I need to be. The plants I collected yesterday are drying nicely in your garden shed. I can afford to wait out a storm." I built up the fire and put water on for more tea, and soon the common room filled with warmth and the comfortable sounds of a rainy morning. The puppeteer came down eventually, his hair still tousled from sleep, and accepted a cup of tea with quiet gratitude. The three of us sat in companionable silence, watching the storm through the windows, each lost in our own thoughts. The first new arrival came around mid-morning, when the worst of the storm had passed, but the rain continued in a steady drizzle. I heard horses before I saw them, 2 from the sound, moving slowly along the muddy road from the south. I went to the door and saw a man approaching on a tired mare, leading a second horse behind him. He sat stiffly in the saddle, and as he drew closer, I understood why. His left leg was bound in a splint, held rigid against the horse's side. "Welcome, friend," I called out. "You look like you could use a warm fire and a dry place to rest." "That leg." The man reined in his horse and looked at me with eyes that had seen much. He was older than I had first thought. Perhaps 60, perhaps more, with gray hair cropped short and a face lined by years of sun and wind and harder things. A scar ran along his jawline, old and faded, and his hands on the reins were scarred as well, the knuckles thick with old breaks, poorly healed. "A warm fire sounds like heaven," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. "And if you have anything stronger than tea, I wouldn't say no to that either." I helped him down from his horse, steadying him as he found his balance on his good leg. Up close, I could see that the splint was well made but not new. This was an old injury then, not a fresh one, something that had healed wrong and never quite healed right. "Road warden," he said, seeing my gaze on his leg. 23 years patrolling the northern routes, keeping travelers safe from bandits and wolves and their own foolishness. This," he tapped the splint, "is a souvenir from my last patrol." A cliff gave way under my horse. She died. I didn't. Some might say I got the worst end of that bargain. I brought him inside and settled him in a chair near the fire, propping his injured leg on a stool. Marin, without being asked, went to her supplies and returned with a small jar of salve. "For the stiffness," she said, offering it to him, "willow bark and something my grandmother called mountain ease. It won't heal what's broken, but it might make the aching more bearable." The old road warden looked at her for a long moment, then accepted the jar with a nod of thanks. "You have the look of a healer. There was a woman in the northern villages who made salves like this. Saved my life more than once when wounds went bad. Once, after a particularly nasty scrape with a wolf pack, she sat by my bed for 3 days, changing poultices and brewing foul-smelling teas until the infection gave up. Perhaps the same woman who saved my sister," the puppeteer said from his seat near the window. He had been watching the exchange with quiet interest. "An old herbalist in the foothills?" "Could be. Small woman, white hair, hands that never seemed to stop moving. That's her." The puppeteer's voice was soft. "She must be ancient now, if she's still alive." "She was ancient when I knew her, and that was 15 years ago. Some people are too stubborn to die." The road warden shifted, trying to find a more comfortable position for his leg. "I'm Aldrich, by the way, Aldrich Vane, formerly of the Northern Road Patrol, currently of nowhere in particular." Introductions were made. Marin, the puppeteer, who gave his name as Theo, and myself. I brought Aldrich the drink he had asked for, a small measure of the dark ale I keep for occasions that call for something stronger than cider, and he accepted it with evident gratitude. "What brings you south?" I asked. "You're a long way from the northern roots." Aldrich took a long drink before answering. "Saying goodbye, I suppose. When I took that fall last winter, the healers in the mountain camps told me I was lucky to keep the leg at all, but it'll never hold up to patrol work again. The cold makes it seize up and rough terrain." He shook his head. "My days as a road warden are done. So I decided to make one last journey. Visit all the places I used to patrol, all the stretches of road I walked 1,000 times. See them one more time before I settle somewhere and wait for the end." "That's a melancholy errand," Marin said gently. "Is it?" Aldrich considered this. "I'm not sure. There's sadness in it, yes. But there's also, I don't know, completion, perhaps. I spent my whole life on those roads. They were more home to me than any building ever was. It seems right to walk them one last time, to remember what they gave me, to say thank you in my own way before I go." He paused, staring into the fire, and when he continued, his voice had grown softer, more contemplative. 23 years. I've lost count of how many travelers I helped in that time, how many bandits I drove off, how many wolves. There was a stretch of road in the northern passes. The locals called it the Widow's Walk, where I spent 4 winters. Dangerous country. The snow would pile so deep you couldn't tell where the road ended and the cliffs began. Every spring when the thaws came, we'd find the bones of travelers who'd wandered off the path in the dark. "That sounds terrifying," Marin said. It was. But it was also sacred in its way. I walked that road so often I knew every stone, every tree, every place where the wind blew hardest. I knew which caves were safe for shelter and which ones harbored wolves. I knew where the ice was thin and where it would hold a man's weight. He smiled, though there was sadness in it. That road was mine, For 4 winters, I was its guardian, and now someone else will walk it, and I'll never see it again. The rain continued through the afternoon, keeping us all confined to the common room. But the confinement was not unpleasant. The fire burned warmly, the company was good, and the conversation flowed easily, as it often does when strangers find themselves sharing shelter from a storm. Aldrich told stories of his years on the road, bandits outwitted, travelers rescued, one memorable night spent keeping wolves at bay with nothing but a torch and sheer stubbornness. Theo spoke of the coastal towns where he had performed, the audiences who laughed and cried at his puppets to stories, the long nights of carving by candlelight. Marin shared her grandmother's wisdom about plants and healing, the folklore and practical knowledge passed down through generations. And I listened, as I always do. The innkeeper's role is often to provide the space for others to fill, to ask the questions that let travelers unburden themselves, to bear witness to the stories that need telling. It is a gift I have come to believe. This chance to hear so many lives, to hold so many stories. Each traveler who passes through leaves something behind, and I'm richer for it. Late in the afternoon, when the rain had finally begun to ease, another sound joined the dripping of water from the eaves. Voices, 2 of them, raised in what sounded like argument. I went to the door and saw 2 figures approaching from the west, walking side by side, but clearly not in harmony. They were young, perhaps 20, perhaps a few years more, and I could see at once that they were related. The same dark hair, the same sharp features, the same way of holding themselves. Siblings, without question. I'm telling you, it was different this time, the young man was saying as they drew near. The tree was taller. The door was open. The tree is always tall and the door is always open, the young woman replied with evident frustration. That's not what matters. What matters is what was behind the door, and you never remember that part. Neither do you. They stopped when they saw me in the doorway, their argument dying away into self-conscious silence. Up close, I could see they were twins. Not just siblings, but mirrors of each other, with matching features and matching expressions of embarrassment at being overheard. "Welcome to the Crossroads Inn," I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "You look like you could use a rest, and perhaps some space to continue your discussion in comfort." The young woman had the grace to look chagrined. "Forgive us. We've been walking for 3 days and we're both tired and out of sorts. I'm Sarah, and this is my brother Tam. We're traveling to—" She paused, exchanging a glance with her brother. "We're not entirely sure where we're traveling to. That's part of the problem." "Come in," I said. "Get dry, get warm, and perhaps you can tell me about this problem over supper." And so my common room grew more crowded still. Sarah and Tam joined the others by the fire, accepting tea and bread, while their wet cloaks steamed on hooks near the hearth. Their argument seemed to have subsided, or at least been set aside, but I could see the tension still lingering between them. The particular strain of people who love each other but cannot agree on something important. The story came out gradually over the course of the evening meal. It began, as many stories do, with something that sounded impossible. "We dream the same dream," Sarah said. "Every night for as long as we can remember. Exactly the same dream, down to the smallest detail." "Not exactly the same," Tam interjected. "Some things are different. The tree, for instance. The tree is always the same tree. What changes is how we see it." I leaned forward, intrigued. Tell me about this dream." They looked at each other, some unspoken negotiation passing between them, and then Sarah continued. "We stand at a crossroads. Two roads meeting in the middle of a great plain. There's a tree at the center, an oak, ancient and vast, its branches reaching toward a sky full of stars. And beneath the tree there's a door standing alone," Tam added, "not attached to anything. Just a wooden door in a frame beneath the oak tree at the crossroads. It's made of dark wood, almost black, with iron hinges that look ancient. There's no handle, just a ring of brass that you have to pull." "And the door is always open," Sarah said. "Just a crack, just enough that we can see light coming through from whatever is on the other side. But we can never see what's on the other side. We can never bring ourselves to push the door open and look." "We've tried," Tam said, "hundreds of times. We approach the door and reach for it, and then we wake up. Every time. We've been having this dream since we were children, and we have never once managed to step through that door." "What kind of light?" Marin asked softly. "Coming through the crack?" The twins exchanged another look. "It's hard to describe," Sarah said slowly. "It's not warm like firelight or cold like starlight. It's welcoming, like the light you see through a window when you're coming home after a long journey, the light that tells you someone is waiting for you." "And what do you feel when you see it?" Aldrich asked. "Fear? Curiosity?" "Both," Tam admitted. "And something else. Something like recognition, like we've been there before, even though we know we haven't, like we belong there, even though we don't know what there is." The common room had gone quiet. Aldrich, Theo, and Marin were all listening now, their own stories set aside in favor of this strange one. Even the fire seemed to crackle more softly, as if straining to hear. "Why have you come here?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Sarah and Tam exchanged another look. "Because of the crossroads," Sarah said. "Because of the tree that we've been searching for years, traveling from one crossroads to another, looking for the one in our dream. And when we heard about this place, an inn at a crossroads with an ancient oak tree, we thought perhaps you had found the place from your dream." "Yes." Tam's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "And when we saw your tree, your crossroads, we knew this is it. This is where our dream happens. We just don't know why or what it means or what we're supposed to do about it." I thought of the white candle on the mantel, the way it had flickered toward the door throughout the day as if anticipating something. I thought of the oak tree standing patient and eternal at the center of the crossroads. I thought of all the travelers who had passed through this place over the years, all the stories they had carried, all the mysteries they had brought and sometimes solved and sometimes left behind. "Perhaps," I said slowly, "you were meant to come here. Perhaps the dream has been leading you to this place all along. And now that you've arrived, you'll find the answers you seek. Or perhaps," Aldrich said dryly, "you've been having a dream about a crossroads and a tree because crossroads and trees are common things, and your mind simply gave shape to something ordinary." Sarah shook her head. "The same dream every night for both of us? The same exact details? That's not ordinary." "No," Marin agreed softly. "That's not ordinary at all. The evening passed in quiet speculation. No one had answers for Sarah and Tam, but neither did anyone miss their story. There are more things in this world than can be easily explained, and those of us who live close to the earth, innkeepers and herbalists and road wardens and storytellers, often have more experience with mystery than those who spend their lives in cities. When at last my guests retired to their rooms, I remained by the fire for a time, watching the flames and thinking. The white candle burned steadily on the mantel, its flame straight and true, but even as I watched, it seemed to lean just slightly toward the window that looked out on the oak tree. The crossroads was quiet. The storm had passed and the sky had cleared to reveal a field of stars so bright they seemed almost close enough to touch. The oak tree stood dark against that brightness, its branches reaching upward as if in supplication or praise. And there, fluttering from one of its lower branches, I could just make out a pale ribbon. Not the blue one I'd noticed yesterday. This one was different. This one had not been there. When I looked out my window at sunset, I rose and went to the door, stepping out into the cool, rain-washed night. The air smelled of wet earth and growing things. I crossed the yard to the oak tree and looked up at the ribbon, trying to see it clearly in the starlight. It was white, pure white, the same impossible white as the candle on my mantel, and it seemed to glow faintly as if it held a light of its own. I did not touch it. Some things are not meant to be disturbed, but I stood there for a long while looking up at that glowing ribbon, wondering who had tied it there and what prayer or hope or fear they had left behind. When I finally returned to the inn and climbed the stairs to my room, the candle's flame had steadied, but as I sat down to write these words, I could have sworn I heard something, a sound like a door creaking open far away, carried on the night wind. Perhaps it was only my imagination. Perhaps it was the dream of the siblings below, bleeding somehow into waking reality. Or perhaps the crossroads was waking up, responding to the arrival of travelers who had been seeking it without knowing what they sought. Tomorrow, perhaps, we will begin to understand, or perhaps we will only find new questions. Such is the way of the crossroads. Day 3. I woke early again, this time to clear skies and the kind of sharp, clean light that follows a storm. The world seemed washed, renewed. Even the air tasted different, sweeter somehow, less heavy. My first thought upon waking was of the white ribbon on the oak tree. I went to my window and looked out at the crossroads, half expecting to find it gone, a figment of last night's strange mood. But no, there it was, fluttering gently in the morning breeze, as real and as mysterious as it had been in the starlight. I dressed and went downstairs to find that I was not the first to wake. Marin stood by the window, her face pale, and she held something in her hands that made my breath catch. The sealed envelope. Her grandmother's final letter, except it was no longer sealed. "I opened it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I woke up in the middle of the night, and my hands were shaking, and I thought, if not now, when? If not here, where? So I broke the seal, and I read it. What did it say? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she handed me the letter. The handwriting was spidery, the hand of someone old and unwell, but still legible. I read, "My dearest Marin, if you are reading this, then I am gone. And you are probably wondering why I left so many things unsaid. The truth is, I said everything I needed to say while I was alive. I told you I loved you every day. I taught you everything I knew. I watched you grow into a healer even better than I ever was. This letter is not for saying goodbye. I already said goodbye. In every cup of tea we shared, every plant we gathered, every quiet evening by the fire. This letter is for something else. There is a crossroads, half a day's walk west of the meadow where we used to gather the purple flowers. An inn stands there and an ancient oak tree. I visited it once, many years before you were born, when I was young and lost and didn't know which road to take. Something happened to me there. I cannot explain it, not in words, not in any way that would make sense. But I left something at that tree, a piece of my uncertainty tied in a ribbon. And when I walked away, I knew which direction my life would take. Not because someone told me, but because I finally allowed myself to know. Go there, Marin, when you are ready. Bring your questions and your doubts and your fears. Leave them at the tree if you can. And then listen to what your heart tells you. You already know the answers. You've always known. You just need to give yourself permission to hear them. All my love, always and forever. Grandmother, I looked up from the letter. Marin was watching me, tears streaming silently down her face. She knew, Marin said. She knew I would come here. She planned it somehow. Even from beyond death, she's still guiding me. What are you gonna do? Marin took the letter back and held it against her chest. What she told me to do. I'm going to go to the tree. I'm going to leave something there. And I'm going to listen. She left while the others were still asleep, walking across the yard to the oak tree as the sun rose higher and the day's warmth began to build. I watched from the doorway, giving her privacy while remaining present in case she needed support. She stood beneath the tree for a long time, her head bowed, her hands moving as if in conversation with someone I could not see. When she finally returned, she came in a way she had not been before. The tight lines around her eyes had softened. The weight she had carried seemed, if not gone, then at least lighter. I left the letter, she said, tied it to a branch with a strand of my hair. It seemed right. She paused. And I know now what I'm going to do. I'm going to go home, my grandmother's cottage. I'm going to tend her garden and continue her work. Not because it's what she would have wanted, though it is. Because it's what I want, because that's where I belong. I poured her tea and served her breakfast, and she ate with an appetite she had not shown the day before. The heaviness had lifted. She had found her answer. Mid-morning, the others had risen and joined us in the common room. Aldrich moved stiffly, his leg clearly troubling him despite Marin's salve, but his spirits seemed good. Theo sat by the window, looking out at the road north with an expression I recognized, the look of someone gathering courage. Sarah and Tam came down together as they had gone up together, and their manner was different than it had been the night before. Less tension, more resolve. Something had shifted between them, some argument resolved or at least set aside. We're going to try again tonight, Sarah announced, to push through the door, both of us, together. If this is the crossroads from our dream, maybe being here will make the difference. Maybe we'll finally be able to see what's on the other side. And if you do, Aldrich asked, what then? Tam shrugged. Then we'll know. And knowing is better than wondering, whatever the answer turns out to be. The day passed quietly. Marin spent hours in the garden, sorting through her collected plants and preparing them for travel. Aldrich asked me about the roads to the south and west, the routes he had not yet traveled in his final journey, and I told him what I knew, which settlements were friendly, which stretches of road were difficult, where he might find other travelers to join for safety. Theo disappeared into his room for much of the afternoon, and when he emerged for supper, he carried his case of puppets. "I'd like to show you," he said, not quite meeting anyone's eyes, "what I've made, what I've been working on all these years, if you're willing to watch." And so, as evening fell and the common room filled with the golden light of sunset through the western windows, we gathered around one of the long tables, and Theo performed. It was not a simple puppet show. It was something else entirely. A story told without words, through movement and gesture and the incredible expressiveness of his carved figures. The king who lost his kingdom and found something better in exile. The maiden who walked through fire and emerged transformed. The fool who spoke truth through jokes and riddles. The old man who taught a child the secret of living well. The story Theo told that evening was one I had never heard before, though it felt ancient, as if it had been waiting to be told since the world was young. A king loses everything: his crown, his lands, his family, his name, and wanders as a beggar through the world he once ruled. He meets a maiden who has been promised to a monster, and together they journey toward her fate. Along the way, they encounter a fool who joins them for no reason he can explain, and an old man who appears at crossroads to offer cryptic wisdom. The puppets moved with impossible grace, their tiny hands gesturing, their carved faces seeming to change expression through some trick of the firelight and Theo's skill. At one point, the maiden puppet actually wept, or so it seemed, a single tear of some clear substance sliding down her wooden cheek. At another, the fool's bells rang in a pattern that sounded almost like speech, as if he were trying to tell us something our ears were not quite able to hear. And through it all, the old man puppet watched. He did not move much, this ancient figure carved from dark wood. But his presence dominated every scene. When the king despaired, the old man was there. When the maiden faltered, the old man steadied her. When the fool's jokes turned bitter, the old man reminded him of joy. The story ended with the four travelers standing at a crossroads, a great oak tree looming above them. The king had found his purpose. The maiden had escaped her fate. The fool had discovered wisdom, and the old man simply nodded, raised his hands in blessing, and disappeared. As Theo lowered the puppets, the common room was utterly silent. The fire had burned down to embers without anyone noticing. Outside, the stars had emerged while we were lost in the story. I watched the old man puppet move across the table, bending with age, gesturing with hands that seemed impossibly lifelike. And I thought of the way the candle had flickered toward Theo when he first arrived. There was something in that figure, something more than wood and string and paint. The puppeteer had put his heart into these creations, and somehow, impossibly, the heart had taken root. When Theo finished, there were tears on more than one face. Marin wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Aldrich cleared his throat roughly. Even Sarah and Tam, wrapped up as they were in their own concerns, seemed moved. "Those are for your mother?" Marin asked. Theo nodded. "For my mother, for my family, to show them what I became while I was gone." They'll understand, Aldrich said quietly. Seeing those, they'll understand. That night, after supper was cleared and the fire had burned down to embers, Ditch, Sarah, and Tam went to their room to try again, to enter the dream and push through the door. The rest of us remained in the common room, not wanting to disturb them, but unwilling to abandon them entirely. We spoke in low voices about nothing of consequence, and we waited. An hour passed, then another. And then, sometime after midnight, we heard footsteps on the stairs. So Sarah appeared first, with Tam close behind. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide, but they did not look frightened. They looked awed, transformed, as if they had seen something that had changed them down to their bones. "We did it," Sarah whispered. "We opened the door." "What was on the other side?" I asked. The twins looked at each other, some wordless communication passing between them. Then Tam spoke, his voice soft with wonder. "Everything," he said. "Every possibility, every choice we've ever made, and every choice we didn't make, every path we might have taken, and every path we might still take. It was like looking at an infinite tree, branches reaching in every direction, and we could see where we were and where we might go. And," he shook his head, "I don't have words for it. It was too big for words." "And then," Sarah continued, we understood. We understood why we've been having this dream our whole lives. It wasn't a mystery to solve or a place to find. It was us, our connection, our bond as twins, as two halves of something whole. The door was always inside us. We just needed to find the right place to open it. I did not fully understand what they were saying. Perhaps no one could, who had not shared their dream, their connection, their experience, but I understood enough to know that something profound had happened, something they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. "What will you do now?" Marin asked. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since they had arrived, her smile held no trace of frustration or uncertainty. "We're going home," she said. "We've been running toward something for so long that we forgot we were also running away from something, our family, our village, the life we left behind when we became obsessed with finding the crossroads from our dream." She looked at her brother. "It's time to go back, to open a different kind of door." The common room was quiet as we all absorbed this. 5 travelers, each carrying their own burdens, their own questions, their own hopes and fears. And one by one, it seemed, the crossroads was helping them find their answers. Or perhaps they were helping themselves. Perhaps the crossroads simply provided the space, a pause in the journey, a moment to breathe and think and listen to what their hearts were trying to tell them. Either way, I was grateful to be part of it. Day 4, the beekeeper arrived at dawn. I was in the garden checking on Marin's drying plants when I heard the distinctive sound of his cart. Not the creak of wooden wheels, but something else, something like a low, constant hum. I looked up to see a man approaching from the south, leading a horse-drawn cart covered with what looked like wooden boxes. As he drew closer, I realized that the hum was coming from the boxes. Bees, thousands of them by the sound. The man himself was perhaps 40, With broad shoulders and hands that bore the marks of many stings, his clothes were practical but well-worn, patched in places, and his face held the weathered look of someone who spent his days under the open sky. "Good morning," he called out as he approached. "I don't suppose you'd have room for a man with 50 hives of bees?" I looked at the cart, at the boxes with their humming inhabitants, and felt a smile tugging at my lips. "As long as the bees stay in their boxes, I think we can manage." His name was Brennan, and his stories came out slowly over breakfast, in between bites of bread and honey. His own honey, produced from his family's farm in the southern lowlands. 5 generations, he said, spreading honey on another slice of bread. "My family's been keeping bees for 5 generations. The same hives, passed down from father to son, mother to daughter. We had the sweetest honey in the region. People came from 3 days' travel just to buy our jars." Had? I noted the past tense. Brennan's face grew somber. "The farm's being sold. I couldn't keep it going on my own, not after—" He stopped, took a breath, started again. "My wife passed 2 years ago. My children are grown and gone, made lives for themselves in the coastal cities. They don't want the farm, don't want the bees. Can't blame them. Well, it's hard work, lonely work, and there's not much money in it anymore." He looked down at his hands. "The buyer wants the land for grazing, doesn't care about the hives. So I'm taking them with me, the last 50 anyway, finding them new homes with other beekeepers, people who'll appreciate what they are." "And what are they?" "History," Brennan said simply. "Memory. My grandmother's hands touched these hives, and her grandmother's hands before her. The queens in these boxes are descended from queens my great-great-grandfather brought over from the old country 200 years ago. That's not something you can replace. That's not something you can buy." He was quiet for a moment. "I've already given away 30 hives. These 50 are the last. I'm taking them to a monastery in the northern hills. The monks there have been keeping bees for centuries. They'll know how to care for them." "Tell me about your wife," I said gently. Brennan smiled, and the smile transformed his weathered face into something younger, softer. "Ilara. She was the daughter of a beekeeper, too. That's how we met at a honey market in the lowland capital. She was trying to sell her father's honey, and I was trying to sell mine, and we spent the whole day arguing about whose bees produced the finer product." He laughed softly. "Neither of us sold much that day. We were too busy talking." "Did you ever settle argument?" "Never. 32 years of marriage, and we never agreed on whose honey was sweeter. She said it was the flowers. Her father's farm was near orchards, and the bees fed on apple blossoms. I said it was the bees themselves, the particular strain my family had nurtured for generations." He shook his head. "We combined our hives when we married, let our bees interbreed. In the end, the honey they produced together was better than either family had ever made alone." He fell quiet, lost in memory. The common room was still, not awkward, but respectful, giving him space for his grief. "She would have wanted this," Brennan continued eventually. "The journey, finding good homes for the last of our bees. She always said they were our children's siblings. the bees, that we'd raised them together just like we'd raised our sons and daughters. She would have wanted to make sure they were cared for even after we were gone. The others had come down by then and were listening to Brennan's story. There was something in it that resonated with all of them, I think. The theme of leaving things behind, of carrying forward what matters most, of finding new purposes for old treasures. My grandmother would have understood, Marin said softly. She used to say that some things can't be owned, only tended, passed along, held in trust for those who come after. Like stories, Theo added. The plays I perform, the tales my puppets tell, they're not mine. They're everyone's. They've been told 1,000 times before me, and they'll be told 1,000 times after. I'm just the current keeper. Brennan nodded slowly. That's it exactly. The bees aren't mine. They never were. I was just their caretaker for a while. Now it's time to find them a new one. The morning passed in preparation for departures. Marin packed her herbs and her remedies, checking each bundle twice to ensure they would survive the journey back to her grandmother's cottage. Theo loaded his puppets into his wagon with infinite care, speaking softly to each figure as he nestled it into its cloth padding. Aldrich studied my rough maps of the southern and western roads, planning the next leg of his final journey. Sarah and Tam walked to the oak tree one last time, standing beneath its branches in quiet communion with whatever they had discovered there. And Brennan tended his bees, opening each hive just enough to check on its inhabitants, murmuring to them in a language I could not quite hear. The humming never stopped, but it seemed to modulate as he worked, rising and falling like a kind of music. By midday, the departures began. Marin was the first to leave. She embraced me at the door, her pack heavy with plants and possibilities. Thank you, she said, for the shelter, for the space, for not asking too many questions, and for listening when I was ready to talk. That's what an inn is for, I replied. That's what I'm for. She pressed something into my hand, a small jar of salve, the same kind she had given Aldrich. For aches and pains, she said. From the purple flowers, my grandmother's recipe, consider it payment for the kindness. I tried to refuse, but she was already stepping back, already turning toward the road. She smiled at me once, her face lighter than it had been when she arrived, and walked down the road toward the east, toward her grandmother's cottage and the life she had finally chosen to claim. I watched until she disappeared around a bend in the road, and then I turned back to the inn. Aldrich left next, his stiff leg making mounting his horse a slow and painful process. But once he was seated, he sat straight and tall, the road warden he had been for so many years. I'll think of this place, he told me, when I'm sitting by some fire in some distant town, too old to travel anymore. I'll remember the rain and the stories and the strange siblings with their stranger dream. And I'll be glad I came this way. Travel safe, I said, and may the road be kind to you. He tipped his head in acknowledgement and turned his horses southward, toward the settlements he had not yet visited, the roads he had not yet walked one last time. Before he rounded the bend, he turned in his saddle and raised one hand in salute, the gesture of one road warden to another, though I had never walked those mountain passes or faced those wolves. Perhaps he was simply acknowledging that we were both, in our own ways, guardians of those who traveled. Sarah and Tam departed together, of course, walking westward along the road that would eventually lead them home. They stopped at the oak tree before they left, standing beneath its branches for a long moment, their hands intertwined. I could not hear what they said to each other or to the tree, but when they turned and walked away, their steps were lighter than they had been. They turned back once at the edge of my sight and waved. I waved back, and then they were gone. Two figures becoming one and then becoming nothing as the road swallowed them. Theo was the last of the morning's departures. He sat for a long time on the seat of his wagon, looking northward, not yet ready to start his horse moving. His case of puppets sat beside him, securely fastened, but his hands kept drifting toward it as if to reassure himself it was still there. "I'm afraid," he admitted. "I've been gone 7 years. What if they don't forgive me? What if they've moved on, built lives without me, no longer have a place for a prodigal son? What if they've been waiting?" I countered. "What if every day they've looked down that road hoping to see you coming home?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he gathered the reins and made a soft sound to his horse, and the wagon began to move. "Thank you," he called back to me, "for the bread, for the shelter, for the questions I needed to hear." "And for the story," I called after him, "the one your puppets told. Won't forget it." He raised one hand in acknowledgement, but he did not turn around. His eyes were fixed on the road ahead, on the mountains in the distance, on whatever waited for him there. I watched until his wagon disappeared around the bend, heading north toward the mountains, toward home, toward whatever waited for him there, and then there was only Brennan and his bees. The afternoon was quiet, as afternoons often are after a wave of departures. The common room felt larger, emptier, though not lonely. It is the echoes of my recent guests lingered. A cup Marin had used, still sitting on the windowsill. A chair pulled close to the fire where Aldrich had sat. The table where Theo had performed his puppet show, still bearing faint marks from the strings. Brennan spent most of the day with his hives, preparing them for the last leg of their journey. The monastery he spoke of was 3 days north, through the mountain passes, a hard road for a man alone with 50 hives of bees, but he seemed at peace with it. This was what he had chosen. This was what remained to be done. In the late afternoon, he joined me in the common room for a cup of tea. "Strange few days," he observed. "I've stayed at many inns over the years, but I've never met such a collection of travelers. Everyone carrying something, everyone looking for something." "That's the nature of Crossroads," I said. "People come here in transition between one thing and another. They're open in a way they might not be elsewhere, willing to share, willing to listen." Brennan nodded slowly. "My wife used to say that bees are the keepers of the world's sweetness, that they gather what's good and transform it into something that nourishes and heals." He looked out the window toward his cart with its humming cargo. "I think maybe innkeepers are something similar. Gatherers, keepers, transformers of stories instead of nectar." It was a kind thing to say, and I received it as such. As evening approached, Brennan asked if he might do something before he left in the morning. "I'd like to leave some honey at your tree," he said. "It's an old tradition in my family. When you pass a sacred place, you leave something sweet. A thank you to whatever spirit watches over it, a blessing for those who come after." I'd be honored, I told him. We walked him together to the oak tree as the sun set. The white ribbon still fluttered from its branch, joined now by the others that travelers had left over the years. Blue and green and yellow, faded by weather and time. Brennan knelt at the base of the tree and set down a small jar of honey, pressing it into the earth so it would not tip. "For the tree," he said quietly, "for the crossroads, for all the travelers who have passed this way and all who will come after." He paused, then added, "And for my wife, who loved honey more than anyone I ever knew. May some of this sweetness find its way to her wherever she is." We stood there in silence as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared. The oak tree seemed to hum very faintly, as if the bees in Brennan's cart were calling to it across the distance, or perhaps it was just the wind in the branches. Either way, it felt like something sacred. Day 5. Brennan left at first light, his cart of bees humming softly as it rolled northward toward the mountain passes. I watched until he was out of sight, then turned back to the inn and the work of the day. The common room needed cleaning, the floors needed sweeping, the linens from the occupied rooms needed airing. I moved through these tasks with the steady rhythm of long practice, finding comfort in the familiar motions. The inn was empty now, or nearly so, just me and the lingering presence of those who had so recently departed, and the white candle burning steadily on the mantel. I stopped my work to look at it, really look at it, in a way I hadn't for some time. The same candle the old woman had given me in my first winter here, the same candle that had burned without diminishing for all these years, the same candle whose flame had flickered toward Theo's puppets, had leaned toward the door when Sarah and Tam arrived, had burned brighter when Brennan brought his bees across the threshold. "What are you?" I asked it, not really expecting an answer. "What do you see that I don't?" The flame danced, but whether in response to my question or simply to an errant draft, I could not say. I finished my work and went outside to check on the oak tree. The jar of honey sat where Brennan had placed it, undisturbed. The ribbons fluttered in the morning breeze, including the white one, which seemed, if anything, brighter than before. And there, at the base of the tree, something I had not noticed the night before. A small carving, wooden, rough but recognizable. An old man, bent with age. I picked it up carefully, turning it over in my hands. It was not one of Theo's creations. The craftsmanship was simpler, cruder. But there was something familiar about it. The posture, the way the figure's hands were raised as if offering something. I thought of Theo's old man puppet, the one carved from dark wood that had made the candle's flame lean toward him. I thought of the way that puppet had seemed older than it should be, as if it had been carved before Theo was born. And I thought of something I had not thought of in years, a story my father used to tell about an old man who walked these roads when the world was young, leaving blessings wherever he went. A spirit of the crossroads, some said, a guardian of travelers, or perhaps just a story passed down through generations, changing with each telling, until the truth at its core was buried too deep to find. I set the carving at the base of the tree next to the jar of honey. It seemed to belong there. It seemed like an offering, or a message, or a promise, or perhaps all three. The afternoon brought no new travelers, which was unusual for this time of year. The roads were dry, the weather fine, the harvest season approaching. all conditions that typically brought a steady stream of merchants and farmers and wanderers to my door. But today, the crossroads was quiet. I used the time to write letters to a supplier in the southern settlements, ordering flour and salt for the autumn months, to a friend in the coastal towns asking after her health, to no one in particular, just words on paper, the scratch of quill and the comfort of putting thoughts into form. As I wrote, I found my thoughts drifting to the travelers who had so recently passed through. Where was Marin now? Had she reached her grandmother's cottage, begun the work of reclaiming her heritage? Where was Aldrich, the old road warden? Was he sitting by a fire somewhere, telling stories of his years on patrol? Had Theo reached his village yet? Had his family welcomed him home, forgiven his long absence, marveled at the puppets he had carved? And Sarah and Tam? Had they found their way back to their own home, opened the doors they had been avoiding, discovered what lay on the other side of their ordinary lives? I did not know. I would likely never know. That is the nature of an innkeeper's existence. We meet people in transit, hold them for a moment, and then release them to continue their journeys. Their endings are not ours to witness. Their stories continue without us. But sometimes I like to imagine. Sometimes, in the quiet hours, I picture them arriving home, setting down their burdens, finding the peace they sought. It is a small gift I give myself, these imagined endings, a way of completing the stories I am only allowed to glimpse. I imagined Marin reaching her grandmother's cottage just as the sun began to set, the light turning the windows to gold. I imagined her standing at the garden gate, her pack heavy on her shoulders, looking at the herbs and flowers her grandmother had planted. Some of them surely still growing, tended by neighbors or simply by their own stubborn will to survive. I imagined her pushing open the door and stepping inside, breathing in the familiar smell of dried herbs and old wood and something else, something that was simply her grandmother, preserved in the walls and floors and furniture. I imagined her setting down her pack and knowing with absolute certainty that she was home. I imagined Aldrich reaching a stretch of road he remembered from his patrolling days, perhaps the widow's walk he had spoken of, or another place equally sacred to him. I imagined him dismounting carefully, favoring his bad leg, and standing for a long time just looking at the road stretching away in both directions. I imagined him remembering all the times he had walked that path, all the travelers he had helped, all the dangers he had faced and overcome. I imagined him finally feeling at peace with leaving it behind, knowing that he had done his duty, that the road would remember him even if no one else did. I imagined Theo arriving at his village just as his family was sitting down to supper. I imagined the moment of shock on their faces, the disbelief that this man, older and more weathered than they remembered, was really their son, their brother. I imagined the tears that would come next, tears of joy and relief and forgiveness, years of hurt melting away in the warmth of reunion. I imagined him opening his case of puppets and showing them what he had made, what he had become, and I imagined their wonder as the figures moved and danced and told their silent stories. And I imagined Sarah and Tam walking westward toward their home, no longer arguing, no longer searching. I imagined them arriving at the village where they had grown up, seeing the familiar houses and streets and faces. I imagined them knocking on doors they had closed years ago, opening conversations they had been afraid to begin. I imagined them finally at peace with the dream they had shared all their lives, no longer haunted by it, but grateful for it, for the bond it represented, for the journey it had taken them on. These imaginings are not real, I know. The true endings of their stories may be nothing like what I picture, but they comfort me, these possibilities. They remind me that the stories continue, that the travelers I meet are not simply characters in my own narrative, but people with lives and futures and endings that are their own to write. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself in the garden, tending to the vegetables that would soon need harvesting. The tomatoes were nearly done for the season, but the squash were coming in strong, their broad leaves shading fruit that grew larger every day. The herbs were fragrant in the late summer heat. Basil and thyme and rosemary, their scents mingling with the smell of warm earth and growing things. I thought of Marin as I worked, of her grandmother who had taught her the secrets of plants and healing. I wondered if she was in a garden right now, kneeling in the dirt, reconnecting with the earth that had nurtured her family for generations. I hoped so. I hoped she had found the peace she sought. The sun was beginning to set when I heard hoofbeats on the road, a single rider approaching from the south. I straightened up, brushing dirt from my hands, and watched as the figure grew clearer in the golden light. It was a young man, perhaps 18 or 20, riding a horse that had clearly seen better days. His clothes were dusty and his face was tired, but there was something in his posture, a kind of determined weariness, that told me he had been traveling for a long time and had no intention of stopping until he reached wherever he was going. "Good evening," I called out as he drew near. "You look like you could use rest and water for your horse." He slowed, but did not stop. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to keep you moving. I'm expected somewhere, and I'm already late." "Where are you headed?" "North, the mountain villages. My mother is—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "She's ill." The message took 2 weeks to reach me, and I've been riding ever since. I felt the familiar ache of compassion that comes with hearing such stories. "At least let me fill your water skins and give you some bread for the road. It will only take a moment, and you'll travel faster if you're not hungry and thirsty." He hesitated, then nodded and dismounted. I led his horse to the trough and went inside to prepare a quick bundle: bread, cheese, a few apples from the tree behind the inn. When I brought it out, he was standing by the oak tree, looking up at the ribbons with a strange expression on his face. "My mother tied one of these," he said softly. "Years ago, when she was young, she used to tell me about it, how she stopped at a crossroads inn on her way to meet my father, and how she tied a ribbon to a tree and made a wish." He reached up to touch one of the faded ribbons. "She always said her wish came true." I did not know which ribbon was his mother's. So many travelers had left their prayers and hopes on this tree over the years. But I said, "Perhaps when you reach her, you can tell her the tree still stands, that the ribbons still fly." He nodded, took the bundle I offered, and mounted his horse. "Thank you for the food, for—" He gestured vaguely at the tree, the inn, the crossroads, "for all of this." And then he was gone, riding north into the gathering dusk, carrying with him a burden I could not lighten and a hope I could only share. I stood at the crossroads for a long time after he left, watching the last of the sunset fade from the sky. The first stars emerged, scattered diamonds against the deepening blue. The oak tree rustled in the evening breeze, its ribbons dancing, its ancient branches creaking softly. "Watch over him," I whispered to whatever spirits might be listening. "Guide him safely. Let him reach his mother in time." The tree made no answer, of course, but I felt in that moment that something had heard me, that my words had been carried somewhere they could do some good. I returned to the inn and prepared for night, banking the fire, washing the day's dishes, making sure everything was ready for whatever travelers might arrive tomorrow. The common room was quiet and empty, but it did not feel lonely. The memories of those who had stayed lingered in the air, warm and comforting. Before I climbed the stairs to my room, I stopped before the white candle on the mantel. Its flame burned steadily, unwavering as it had for all these years. I thought of the old woman who had given it to me, of her words about welcome and refuge and light in the darkness. "Thank you," I said to the candle, or perhaps to her, or perhaps to whatever force had brought all these travelers to my door. "Thank you for the stories. Thank you for the lives I've been allowed to touch. Thank you for the privilege of being the keeper of this place." The flame flickered once, a small, bright movement, almost like a nod, and then burned steady again. I smiled and went upstairs to write these words. Day 6. The new day dawned clear and bright, and with it came the sound I had been waiting for. Hoofbeats on the road. I woke early, as I often do, and went through my morning rituals, lighting the fire, setting water to boil, checking on the bread dough I had set to rise the night before. The inn felt different today somehow, lighter, as if the weight of the past few days' stories had lifted, leaving behind only a quiet sense of completion. I was kneading the bread dough when I heard them, multiple horses, approaching from the east at a steady pace. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to the door, stepping out into the cool morning air to watch as a small group approached. 3 riders on tired horses, their clothes dusty from travel. Merchants, by the look of them, heading west toward the frontier homesteads with goods to sell and stories to trade. Their packs were heavy with wares, bolts of cloth perhaps, or tools and implements for the settlers who had little access to such things. The road they traveled was long and profitable for those willing to make the journey. The crossroads was waking up again. The brief pause was over. New travelers were arriving, bringing new burdens and new hopes and new stories to tell. "Good morning," the lead rider called out as they approached. He was a heavy-set man with a broad face and friendly eyes, the kind of merchant who probably knew half the settlements along his route by name. "Is this the Crossroads Inn? We've been riding since before dawn and could use a rest." "It is," I replied, "and you're welcome here. I have fresh bread baking and water for your horses. Come in, come in." They dismounted with the weary gratitude of travelers who had pushed through the night, and I led their horses to the trough while they stretched stiff muscles and looked around at the inn, the crossroads, the ancient oak tree standing sentinel at the intersection of roads. "That's a remarkable tree," one of the younger merchants said, gazing up at its spreading branches. "I've never seen one that big, not this far from the coast." "It's been here longer than anyone can remember," I said. "Some say it was here before the roads were built, and the roads were made to meet beneath it. Others say it grew from a seed planted by the first settlers in this region. The truth is probably somewhere in between, as truths often are. The merchant nodded thoughtfully, still staring at the tree. The ribbons, what are they for? Prayers, wishes, hopes. Travelers tie them to the branches before they continue on their way. It's an old tradition, older than the inn itself. Some believe the tree carries their prayers to wherever prayers go. Others simply find comfort in leaving a piece of themselves behind. Was quiet for a moment, then reached into his pack and pulled out a scrap of cloth, a piece of a blue fabric, perhaps from a garment that had seen better days. May I? Of course. I watched as he walked to the tree and tied his ribbon to one of the lower branches, his lips moving in words I could not hear. When he returned, his face was peaceful in a way it hadn't been before. "My daughter," he said simply. "She's about to have her first child. I've been away from home for 3 months, and I won't be back for another 2. I wanted to send her something, a blessing, a hope, whatever the tree can carry. I'm sure she'll feel it," I said, and I meant it, even if she doesn't know where it came from. I welcomed them in, as I always do. I lit the fire and put water on to heat and sliced bread from yesterday's baking. The common room filled again with voices and movement and life, and the white candle on the mantel burned a little brighter, as if pleased by the company. The merchants ate heartily, exchanging news from the coastal towns, prices and politics and gossip from places I had never visited and likely never would. They spoke of ships from distant lands, of spices and fabrics and curiosities, of storms that had delayed the trading season and droughts that had affected the harvest. It was the kind of information that meant little to me personally, but that I filed away nonetheless, knowing that future travelers might benefit from knowing such things. This is what the crossroads is for, I thought as I moved between tables, filling cups and answering questions. This is what I'm for, to provide a place of rest, to welcome all who need it, to hold their stories for a while and then let them go. The old woman who gave me the candle understood this, I think. "Welcome them all," she said, and I have tried. For all these years, I have tried to honor that charge. The merchants ate and drank and rested, and then they mounted their horses and continued westward toward the frontier. New travelers arrived in their wake. A young couple returning from a wedding in a nearby village, their faces still glowing with the joy of celebration. A farmer bringing produce to market in his creaking cart. A wanderer with no clear destination and no apparent hurry to find one, who sat in the corner and watched the world go by with eyes that had seen much and judged little. The rhythm of the inn resumed, familiar and comforting. The questions of the past few days about dreams and doors and things left behind faded into memory, becoming just another set of stories to hold. But that night, after the last guest had retired and the common room fell quiet, I went to the oak tree one more time. The carving was still there, the old man with his raised hands. The honey jar sat beside it, sealed and undisturbed. The ribbons fluttered in the night breeze, a cascade of colors against the darkness. And the white ribbon, the one that had appeared without explanation, that seemed to glow with its own light, hung perfectly still, even as the others danced in the wind. I reached up and touched it. Just once, just lightly. It was soft, softer than any cloth I had ever felt, and warm, as if it had been lying in the sun, though the night was cool and the stars were cold above. "Thank you," I whispered, though I did not know to whom I was speaking. "Thank you for bringing them here, for letting me be part of their stories, for the sweetness of these few days." The ribbon seemed to pulse beneath my fingers, a single gentle throb, like a heartbeat, and then it was still again, just cloth, just a ribbon on a tree, no different from the others. I walked back to the inn and climbed the stairs to my small room beneath the pitched roof. The white candle burned on the mantel below, its light visible through the crack beneath my door. I sat at my father's desk and picked up my pen. There is so much I do not understand about this place. The mysteries multiply faster than they resolve. Every answer seems to bring new questions. Every story opens doors to others. But this much I know: I am where I am supposed to be, doing what I am supposed to do. The crossroads chose me, or I chose it, or we chose each other. And whatever comes, whatever travelers arrive, whatever stories they bring, whatever strangeness manifests beneath the oak tree, I will be here, welcoming them all, as I was asked to do, as I will always do. The candle burns, the roads stretch away in 4 directions. The oak tree stands patient and eternal, and tomorrow there will be new travelers. There always are.
And so, another evening at the Crossroads Inn comes to a close. The fire has burned down to embers, the travelers have found their rest, and the innkeeper has set down his pen for another night. Thank you for joining us. I hope these stories have brought you some measure of peace, some warmth against the darkness, some comfort as you drift toward sleep. If you enjoyed your time at the inn, perhaps leave a like or subscribe to join us for future episodes. We'll be here at the Crossroads whenever you need a place to rest. Until next time, safe travels, sweet dreams. Good night.